Hello and welcome to this segment of our Belonging Basics series. In this video, we're going to be talking about promoting connection and belonging through inclusive routines. If this is your first video with us, welcome. I'm Sally Hansen. I'm here with my colleague and friend Jackie Joseph. We're here with the University of Denver creating this series for practitioners, coaches, families, leaders, all about belonging, inclusion, and connection.
So as Sally just said, this is a series of videos. This set of videos in our Belonging Basics series is about routines, but the entire video series has been generously funded by Rocky Mountain Human Services. They're a local nonprofit organization here in Denver, and so we take a moment as much as we can to thank them for their generous funding, which enables us to create these opportunities and offer you them at no cost.
As we said earlier, today's video is about routines. And we talk about routines in early childhood a lot, as we should. Routines are an evidence-informed practice that pretty much everyone agrees is important for children's learning and growing. If you're a speech language pathologist, you likely think about embedding communication support into routines. All of the therapists that we work with, myself included, talk about how important routines and consistency and predictability are to help children feel safe and ready to learn. And so a lot of us are focused on routines. And I thought it'd be neat, Jackie, if you could just talk through for a minute, what are some of those outcomes that we can expect from good, solid, inclusive routines that we've learned about over the years?
These are obviously pictures of children on the screen, and the really cool part about routines is that we know these types of outcomes really relate to us as adults as well. So routines will promote the opportunity for kids to feel safe and secure when they know what's happening, what's coming up. Routines help kids know there's a change or something different that's happening and prepare them for it. They help kids practice autonomy because we can build in lots of those choices like we've already been talking about, which helps them build confidence because they gain more and more agency over their day and what they're able to do because they're practicing things in naturally occurring contexts. It helps them try and learn new things because when I can relieve space in my brain where I might be worrying about what's happening next, what are we doing, I can feel that safety. And then I have space in my brain to try new things or learn new things or problem solve. And it also helps us develop social and emotional skills from autonomy to self-advocacy to collaborating and sharing space with people. I do want to say really quickly, sometimes we call these inclusive routines, and you'll notice that the videos are named belonging-based routines. And in these videos, we say belonging-based because while we're, of course, focusing on the what they are and what we do and what children do, we're focusing more on how we are with them within our routines too, and how that promotes their experiences of belonging.
I love that you brought up, when we have these routines that we expect what's going to happen, that frees up brain space. If you're a person who's interested to learn more about that, that's a really hot topic as well around executive function and the notion of working memory. And the Harvard Center for Early Childhood Development has some cool resources. What you just said, Jackie, really leads into what I think was my own personal aha moment. And I want to share a little bit about it because those of you watching might also have had this aha moment. Maybe you knew this and I just am late to the game. But for me, I was working for almost 10 years doing technical assistance and training and helping programs to think about increasing opportunities for inclusion. And one of our foundational practices was around routines. And to be very honest, I really never understood exactly how a routine led to inclusion because a routine could happen in a classroom that wasn't serving children without disabilities, in a classroom where everyone was non-disabled. I saw it working for children. I knew it was making a difference, but I didn't really understand how is this routine concept really something that matters when we talk about inclusion? And to be honest, my aha moment has come in the past couple of years through the work that we're doing with our team around belonging and understanding what is it that leads to a child, a family member, a teacher in a classroom experiencing belonging. And so when we come in and we do some coaching, if we're having questions about how do we support this child to communicate more in this routine, or how do we help a child participate more? What if there's some behaviors that we want to think about? We actually rarely start with the child. We almost always start with the routine. And it got me thinking, that's it. Because if we design routines from the beginning to reflect the many ways that children learn, communicate, participate, and interact, that's how we get to belonging and inclusion. The routine itself has to be set up for the variety of learners in our classroom. Because if we don't, that's when children with disabilities, children with histories of trauma or non-secure attachment styles, children who learn or communicate in unexpected ways, they end up working a lot harder to do things that don't even feel right or don't work for them. And that's just to be part of a daily routine. So when we talk about belonging-based routines, we're talking about setting things up right from the start around these key concepts that you've heard us refer to, if you're following along in this series. They're belonging builders. And we think about, how do we set up our routine for connection? How do we make sure within our routine we presume competence? What are the communication pathways available right away so that every child can communicate? What do they love? What do they need? What do they think is funny? And what are the meaningful choices? You've heard us weave those concepts in because they are the foundation for us, no matter what we're talking about: caring community, supporting environment, routines. Those 4 C's, the belonging builders, are how we make sure we're thinking about and focusing on belonging. And so you can find more about the belonging builders on the challengingtoconnected.com site. They're on a tab of resources primarily for teachers. We would say everyone would benefit from reading them, thinking about them, planning around them, and incorporating them into your practice. Jackie, is there anything you want to add about the belonging builders before we move into our second half of how we plan routines?
What you were talking about got me thinking, Sally, and I love how in another video you said something like, I'm not going to get this out perfectly. And I'll be honest, this is something that I'm still figuring out exactly what I think and how to say it in my mind. But I think that what we're showing here in terms of the belonging builders and really connecting it to how we're going to create belonging-based routines is this point that routines aren't about making children follow directions or behaving in a certain way or doing things the way that we think that they should or the way that we think that they need to do things. Of course, routines help us with those shared agreements that we've talked about and learn how we can be in community together in ways that match what we all need and prefer. But routines, when we're considering them from that belonging-based lens, they're opportunities for connection and community. So routines are also how we are together. They're how we create predictable shared experiences where every child participates in their own ways and gets to contribute to our community and where we all get to feel a part of something that we share together. In this series, of course, we'll talk about how we design those shared experiences, and that's what we're going to get into next with the framework that we use with routines. And we'll use these belonging builders so that as we're designing these routines, we're doing it in a way that ensures that we're promoting belonging for children and adults and families.
And I think that takes us to, how are we going to do that? And as Jackie said, routines give us an opportunity to intentionally plan. We think about those 4 C's, and then within our routines, we've got our 4 P's. See what we did there? And the 4 P's for routines that are belonging based, that are inclusive, that set every child up to be successful and thrive and learn and grow their way. We start with purposeful, which means we intentionally plan the routine around the learning that we want for children. What is it we hope that they learn? Where are we at in our developmental trajectories and growth? And equally important, what are the experiences we want them to have in this routine? What is it we want them to have in terms of peer experiences with their friends? How do we want to interact with them, adult to child? What do we want it to feel like? Then we move into predictable. Predictable is one area that I think many early childhood educators are already doing incredibly well. And so if that's you, air high five. When we think about predictable, the quarter turn that we like to bring to it from the belonging lens is that it is consistent. We know how important consistent, predictable routines are. We add in some flexibility and opportunities for choice, prioritizing, again, connection and communication options. And that will be an entire video segment where we'll walk through what does it look like to be both predictable and flexible. Then we'll talk about person-centered. This is where we design to support each child in ways that reflect who they are. It helps them feel included, capable, connected. This one takes a little bit of getting to know the children in our class. We can think about purposeful and predictable even before we've met all the children in our caring community. Person-centered is that place where now that we've gotten into our school year and we've gotten started and we know the children in our class or someone new is coming mid-year, how do we go back and adapt our routine, make those changes, offer more choices that fit the children we have? And then last is playful. Early childhood is a joyful time. And so our routines, when we're thinking from an inclusion and belonging perspective, we're thinking about how children learn and grow best, which is through play. And again, that quarter turn is going to be play that honor who they are, how they like to play, what play is for them. And so each of these we'll walk through specifically in our videos. What does it look like? How do we do it? And likely you're going to find places throughout where you're already doing some of these things. And this framework might offer you ideas to be a little more systematic, a little more intentional, a little more planned. So let's start with purposeful. Purposeful routines is our first P. When we think about a purposeful routine, as I said before, we're thinking about why are we doing this routine? What do we hope for children to get out of it? We're planning around the learning we want children to get, but also the experiences. I can tell you that in an early experience of coaching, I was interacting with a great teaching team. And they had a routine that was sequenced like this. Circle time. Everyone's sitting together, listening to a story. The lead teacher's reading the story. The assistant teacher is setting up snack. And then the children get done with their story. They go stand in line, wash their hands. Then they come and sit at their table and they wait. And then they sing a song. Then after everybody sing the song, now they eat their snack. Enjoy their graham cracker, their cup of milk or water, and then wait at the table until everyone else is done. And then once everyone else is done, they went back to circle. And then at circle time, the teacher did another social emotional lesson or something like that. And the assistant teacher cleaned up the tables. And the problem they were having, does anyone want to guess? Jackie, what do you think the problem they were having could have possibly been?
The first thing I think of is the smell of Greek yogurt, which after working in childcare, I love Greek yogurt, but the smell. Then we have to learn about social and emotional skills when I can't do anything but smell Greek yogurt. But the other thing I wonder about is all of the ways that teachers took the direction and led there. And might children need some more opportunities to have some more choice or lead a little bit themselves? Or does that work for them or not?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things. When we were talking about it and looking at the problem, they were having children who wanted to get up and play instead of waiting for everyone else at the table to finish. They were having children in that second group time being very rolly all over the rug and getting up and wanting to go play. And what was fascinating about this, and sorry for the long story, but we went through it step by step. What's the purpose of the story? Okay, that's pre-literacy. Sometimes there's social emotional lessons. So they had a why in that way. Then washing our hands. Well, of course we need to wash our hands. That's part of taking care of ourselves. When we come and sit at the table and we wait, which was increasingly difficult for some children, what is the purpose of waiting? And what is the purpose of the song? And talking some of that through, what we realized is no one in that teaching team felt strongly that children at 3 or 4 years old need to learn to wait until everyone else sits down to eat. It had just always been done like that. That's how they were taught to do the routine. And that carried through actually for the rest of the steps. Yeah, we don't really want to do circle them, but that's what we've always done. That's how the assistant teacher gets the table clean so we can go play. And when we thought about what is the purpose of this, that's when they had that moment of, oh, we could do it differently because we aren't getting the learning or the experiences that we want for children in this routine. And we can change it up and we can make it work for the children we have. And then the other thing that we think about for purposeful routines, this also gives us that systematic approach, that opportunity for intentional planning. And I think, Jackie, maybe you'd be willing to share some of the how do we embed opportunities for those individual or specific IEP goals?
I'm increasingly loving purpose as we get to really talking about it with teams and realize how important it is in making class-wide decisions. And then especially decisions for individual children who have IEBs or individualized learning programs. And of course, we're going to honor children's individual goals and children's individual support needs. And as much as we can plan a routine that gives them choice to join in and do it their way, the less individualized focus and resources need to be planned and used. And to start even thinking about that is to begin here with purpose. When we know the purpose of a routine, it helps us recognize when and where we could embed IEP goals. And when we say embed IEP goals, we know that the best way kids learn is within naturally occurring contexts and routines where it makes sense and where other kids are learning similar things or practicing similar things. So for example, if the purpose of snack time, like Sally was talking about, is actually connection and conversation, that could be a great time to embed an individualized communication goal or to observe how a child is initiating and responding with their peers. Really thinking about what the purpose is enables us to think about how can all children share this experience together and participate in ways that matter to them. It also helps us facilitate unplanned opportunities because with IEP goals, for sure, we want to plan to make sure that children are getting opportunities to practice. And what can be even more meaningful is when children are interested in something where they are going to need to practice or use a particular skill that's in their IEP. And knowing the purpose of routine enables us as adults to know these types of opportunities are more likely to happen during these routines. And so we can keep an eye out and be more child-led and follow their lead and facilitate practicing goals in meaningful times when they are really motivated and excited to do that themselves, which takes some of that adult direction out of it. I think most of all, it just, again, helps us stay centered on belonging while supporting children's individualized education programs, because having an IEP doesn't mean that you have separate or different experiences. It means that you have personalized or individualized supports to be able to fully participate and inclusively engage and joyfully learn in the same routines and experiences that your peers do. And it really helps us remember that, for us at least, in these videos, the purpose is belonging. The purpose is shared experiences. And how do we support a child's progress on their IEP goals while ensuring that those things are at the center of the decisions that we're making?
Yeah, I think that does come full circle, because when we think about the routine I described earlier, that routine was not designed with a child with motor support needs in mind, for example, to be at circle, to transition to wash hands, to transition to the table, to transition back to circle. That's a lot of moving parts in a very short amount of time. And so there's lots and lots of reasons that we want to be thinking about the children in our classroom and what do we want them to experience in those routines that leads to belonging. And that's for all children. So let's start with just a little bit of reflection for yourself. This is something that you can do with your teams around any of your routines. We're going to share an example of a story time. If you think to yourself, jot some notes down, What do you want children to learn or practice during story time? We all read books in early childhood. What are we trying to get at here? What do we want children to learn? And there is no right answer. There's just the answer you have with the children you have in mind. Also, what do we want them to experience? What do we want that to feel like? What do we want them to take away from story time in addition to learning goals? In a particular team that we worked with, they were having a problem where story time wasn't going very well. And we hear this a lot, that large group time is not always the most successful time of day for teachers or for children. Something about sitting for a long period of time when you're 3 or 4 years old doesn't always work well. When we started digging into it, we asked the team from the butterfly room, what is it that you want children to learn and experience during story time? What is the purpose of this? They talked it through, they brainstormed, they dug really deep in reflecting, and they decided there were a few things that were really important to them. One, pre-literacy, vocabulary development. We introduced new words and language all the time. They also had a very linguistically diverse classroom, and they did want to embrace and celebrate children's home languages. They also realized that some children needed more or different support to actually be inclusively engaged in story time, that just auditory listening wasn't working for every child. And so they wanted to brainstorm, how do we support different children's learning styles? And then they noticed that a lot of children really did love books on tape, or when they had opportunity to look at books independently where they could turn the pages and go at their own pace. There were children who really enjoyed that and would look at books for a long period of time. What they decided is that story time didn't have to look one way. So they offered 3 choices. They decided that during story time, to meet their purpose, they were going to offer children every time the choice to read alone. You could use an audiobook. They invited families to record so that they could hear their home language being spoken. You could read with a friend. There was an area of the room, a cozy corner. There was some shared agreements for how to do that they worked through together, and you could look at a book with a friend. The other option is you could go to that circle time, that traditional teacher in front with the book, and you could read with teacher and friends. In that situation, they added those 4 C's: choice, flexible seating, props, so that we have options for how we want to participate and inclusively engage. And they added more visual supports because of that person-centered piece and recognizing that some children needed something closer to them so they could experience the story in the ways that their friends and peers did. Jackie, when you hear about an example like this, is there anything that comes to mind for you from a belonging lens?
First of all, I want to say I was smiling when you were saying about large group is always the hardest time. A couple years ago, we did a really large study on children's social and emotional confidence and behavior, and I got to coach dozens of classrooms and partner with them on this. Yeah, circle time is always a challenge. And oftentimes when we have the intention of developing an individualized plan for a child, we ended up creating a plan that was broad and a routine that worked for every child in the class. But when I see a routine like this, I think, first of all, it's awesome. And there are so many really great ideas. I love when people share ideas like this with us, or we get the opportunity to work with teams who are creative in how they respond to the children in their environment. It makes me think about shared purpose, because kids are all a part of the same story time routine. They have the same goals. They get the opportunity to work on their goals, not just IEP, but general and maybe IEP, in ways that work for them, because they also have flexible participation. Like you're saying, they can join in and engage in ways that match their preferences or their needs or their energy, because I would assume that the same children don't make the same choices every day. I could see my daughter Goldie wanting to read alone by herself some days, and then other days wanting to read with a friend or with the group. I can imagine that with such a solid purpose, they're also embedding children's individualized goals in here and their supports. I bet they're planning ahead and making sure there's meaningful vocabulary on AAC devices And knowing the purpose enables them to know the types of supports that they need. We're starting to see how this all offer us that really intentional teaching process already here with this first P in routines. But most of all, it goes back to that shared experience. And I think this is really reflective of how a caring community that's having a shared experience can look.
Yeah, and I think that the takeaway after this shift, because this classroom started with a problem that circle wasn't going well at story time. They did a lot of intentional thinking and planning, but it's not that much work. They spent one of their team meetings brainstorming their purpose and thinking about flexible choices. They created the visuals and then they co-created community agreements around these choices with children. And then within a week, they were able to get this up and running. And the after isn't always going to be this great, but it was in this situation. The teachers felt less stressed. They were excited because they had opportunity to interact with children during this time of the day rather than redirect children over and over and over. They were experiencing circle as stressful as adults. And then thinking, well, if it's stressful as adults, what does it feel like to children? Are they experiencing this as stressful? And do we want children to think book time and story time and reading is stressful? That doesn't match the experience. We want them to experience reading as fun and exciting and all of those emotions that create lifelong learners. And after they made this shift, and they strategically planned, the lead teacher is still going to be reading the story, or maybe the assistant would take turns with that. Someone else is going to be over in the area where children are reading by themselves or reading with a friend to support as needed. They felt calmer. They felt more relaxed. And they saw children really develop a love of reading that they hadn't been experiencing before. So this is your opportunity to pull out that activity guide, to reflect on the purpose of one or more of your routines. Talk to your team. What is it we want children to learn? What are some choices that we can offer? What do we want them to experience? We can think about our caring community always, which is focused on connection and belonging, promoting children's autonomy and joyful learning, and then having those opportunities for inclusive engagement where children can do things in ways that work for them. Remember, it's not chaos. We don't just throw our hands up and let the preschoolers decide. It's intentional. It's making sure that our routines reflect the children in our classroom, what we want them to learn, how the experiences are designed, and in ways that work for children and for us. So that takes us to the end of this segment of the Belonging Basics video series. You can come back, join us for the next P, which is predictable, and we'll dig in more there. The end.